The arena roof peeled back like the iris of a vast metallic eye, exposing a wedge of black sky spattered with cold stars. Floodlights warmed up to a humming glare, and banners from 100 worlds fluttered along the rim, iridescent mesh for the Shile, velvet flares for the Juroxy, hammered copper sigils for the Zarkan Dominion. The smell was a complex braid of ozone, machine oil, spiced street food, and the faint mineral tang of the prepared sand that the custodial bots rake between bouts. Cadet Aria Vega bounced on the balls of her feet to bleed off nervous energy. Palms open and unclenched. She had learned, in hand-to-hand class, that clenching too early spent strength you'd need later. Let it flow. Breathe in, breathe out. Every inhale brought the arena's noise closer. Every exhale pushed it away. Beside her, Tiri adjusted her medical harness, the little diagnostic lights pricking green down her sternum and across the jointed plates that shielded her for narrow shoulders. Tiri's species Threxians had thin, cartilaginous frames built for speed and delicate work, not the blunt force spectacle of an open ring. But at the academy, even medics participated in the synthesis rite. The yearly skills exhibition meant to celebrate cooperation across species. Sparring, not maiming. Control, not dominance. That was the point. In theory, you're doing the pulse snare first, Arya said, keeping her voice light. Quick whip, ankle wrap, down they go. I'll be in the second rotation running interference. You won't even break a sweat. Tiri's for hands fussed with the strap again. That presumes my opponent is polite about gravity. They'll be cadets from Class Beta, Arya said. They're all posture and no plan. Tiri's nostrils flared, a Threxian smile, spoken like someone who plans to posture in front of them later. Absolutely, Arya said. I've been practicing my victory nod. Show me. Arya turned her chin with exaggerated seriousness and set a gaze so heroic it bordered on ridiculous. Tiri chittered softly Threxian laughter and two of her hands went from her harness to squeeze Arya's wrist. You'll be careful. Always, Arya said. She wasn't lying. Careful was how she had come top of tactical theory 3 terms running. Careful was how she could track for possible outcomes from a glance at a doorway's hinges. Careful was the voice in her head that counted. Everything. The number of steps to the medic bay. The distance between ringside rail and sand. The arc of a thrown baton at 3 different gravity settings. A deep tone rolled through the arena. The announcer, a brass-lunged synth with a penchant for drama, boomed for the rite's opening salutation. Threxian Cadet Tiri of Hive Cluster 9 versus Zarkan Cadet Cracks of House Juruk. Arya's careful cracked. Cracks? She said. They put you against cracks? Tiri's whole frame stilled. Even the restless tips of her lower hands went quiet. You know him. Everyone knows him. He's not Beta. He got bumped up from Gamma after he tore a training dummy in half, and then argued the dummy had insulted him. Arya leaned, peering across the prep corridor toward the far gate. Through a slit, she spotted the Zarkan champion, Carapace plates polished until they threw the light back like knives, mandibles lacquered red, house color, a crest of ritual spines curving from his scalp in the particular geometry that Zarkan houses used to signal lineage and legal rank. Cracks rolled one shoulder, shrugged his heavy practice harness into place, and flexed his hands inside armored gauntlets. Cracks follows rules. When someone bigger than him is watching, Arya said. The rite is supposed to be non-lethal. Supposed to be, Tiri echoed, softer. Arya's mind chewed roots. Appeal to the marshal, to slow, swap rotations. The order was posted. The academy was rigid about the rite. If he goes hard, she said, you bail. No stubbornness, Tiri, you hear me? Tiri fixed all for eyes on her for Threxians. It was a gesture of absolute attention. I'm a medic, Arya. I know exactly what bones look like when they shatter. I won't be brave. I'll be smart. Arya tried to be reassured. It didn't quite take. A little group of first-years clustered at the corner waved enthusiastically at Tiri. She had been tutoring them in xenobiology, teaching them memory songs for enzyme chains as if they were nursery rhymes. Tiri lifted one slender hand to wave back, then dropped it, breathing like a runner sizing a track. You'll be watching. I'll be watching, Arya said. They bumped foreheads human and Threxian and then the gate bot whisked Tiri through into the blaze of the ring. Arya stepped up to the rails, The sand, micro-angled to keep footing even under the gravity modulations, rippled faintly with every shift from the underpinning actuators. Above, the cameras half the galaxy tuned in at least for the highlights found Cracks as he took his side and spread his arms to take the crowd's noise like a tidal bath. Zarkan's supporters shook metallic chords that rang like struck wire. Threxian contingents answered with their layered chittering chant. The Marshal's Orcs drone hovered center ring, green beacon blinking, rules acknowledged. Match non-lethal. No strike after submission. Drones empowered to stun. Begin on tone. The tone came. The crowd sucked in a shared breath. Cracks moved like a battering ram that had learned to tiptoe. There was no artistry in it, but there didn't need to be. Velocity and mass wrote their own essays. Tiri sidestepped, light as a leaf. The first charge skated past her. She snapped the pulse snare off her hip with the motion of a stage magician producing a ribbon. And the flex cord sang as it uncoiled. Quick whip, ankle wrap. Down they go. Arya grinned despite herself. That's my medic. The snare kissed Cracks' ankle and sloughed off. Zarkan physiology, cuticles dense as ceramic. Microbarbs to resist binding. Arya's brain logged the miscalculation a fraction of a second. Before Cracks' elbow shot backward in an after sweep, that would have turned a human's rib cage into a ruin. Tiri folded, flexed, vanished beneath it. She always had a trick at the edge of failure. A second loop of the snare went low, seeking tendon, and caught. Cracks stumbled. The crowd made a surprised noise. Cracks' mandibles clicked. Tiri, disengage, Arya muttered to herself, her fingers tight on the rail. Take your point and disengage. Tiri did the textbook thing. A shallow bow, a signal for reset. The unspoken etiquette of these exhibitions. The Marshal drone pulsed green again, warm as approval. Cracks took his next step through the bow. The snare held. Tiri wrenched, converting his momentum into a controlled topple. The sand accepted him with a grunt's thud. The green light was still steady. Krx rolled. It happened in a shrinking, ugly way. He came up inside Tiri's guard, forearm like a club. The first hit, a glancing blow by the standards of Zarkan strikes, was still enough to send Tiri's helmet askew. Arya's teeth clicked together. The Marshal drone raised its pitch, a warning. The green blinked faster, impatient. Tiri threw up her upper hands to signal a clean break. Cracks didn't break. He pressed. Each strike a public thesis. Power justifies itself. Tiri reeled, trying again for the snare, and Cracks tore it free, the cord snapping like a dry twig. The green light on the drone pulsed to yellow. Cease, cease. The stun nodes along the ring's perimeter primed, a faint sulfurous smell frosting the air. The crowd's noise took on a serrated edge. Marshal, Arya said to no one, to everyone. Marshal, do your job. On the fourth strike, Tiri went down hard enough that Arya felt the thump in her own knees through the deck. The yellow blinked red. The surrender alarm yelped a rising, embarrassing whistle reserved for cadet matches that said enough. You've made your point. Stop. It was supposed to be impossible to ignore. Cracks ignored it. He brought his gauntlet down again. Tiri's helmet crumpled along one seam with a pop. That was the sound Arya would later hear in dreams and in quiet rooms and in the middle of conversations about nothing. The sound of something designed to protect failing in exactly the way it had been designed not to. The stun shot finally came. A crack of blue across Cracks' back. He shuddered, paused, absorbed it like a storm-soaked tree and turned, slow, insulted. Zarkan dense muscle, Zarkan resistance. The ring's safety tech could be overrun by raw specifications, and Cracks, raised in House Juruk, had been fed iron and ambition since hatching. He looked at the drone as if at a fly. Then he looked down at Tiri, at the little medic whose chittering songs had taught first-years how to breathe through panic. He raised his hand again. Arya moved later. She would try to untangle how much choice there had been between impulse and action. She would find fragments of decisions, angles, weights, roots like bits of glass in a handful of sand, glittering and cutting. In the moment, there was only the rail, the measured drop to the arena, the arc of Cracks' arm, and the space between Arya's ribs where fear and rage found each other and fused. She vaulted. The human body is not made for that kind of landing. But Arya had trained on altered grav floors and caught herself with a roll that burned her shoulder and tasted like electricity up her teeth. When she came up, the noise of the arena wrapped her like a shock blanket. She shrugged it off like a too-hot cloak. "Security breach," the announcer said. Alarmed and delighted all at once. "Unscheduled entry," Krax turned. Send whispered off his bracers as he faced her. He had a predator's poise, head forward, weight balanced, eyes black and bright. Round them, drones rose into a cautious halo. Marshals shouted. A cascade of messages pinged Arya's wristcom and went unheeded. "Get up, Tiri," Arya said, because the words were the only thing preventing her from doing something irreversible. Get up, get." Tiri didn't move. Arya's vision tunneled. She saw the bevels on Krax's knuckle plates, the dried lacquer at the edges of his mandibles, the hairline cracks in the sand where the gravity actuators vibrated too close to the surface. She saw the salt sheen on the audience's lips, the smug slant of a House Jurek banner. She saw the bright pulse of Tiri's medical harness stuttering, trying to decide if her patient was stable enough to be worth alerting. Krax held his arms out in a posture that said, "See, the human has come to tangle," and the crowd, hungry for any escalation, rose to it. Some jeered, some sang, some called her reckless. A child 3 rose up, had a bag of flash chips that flared in little fragrant pops. Arya's throat felt filled with sugar smoke. "Stand down," a marshal boomed through the PA. "Cadet Vega, stand down." Arya's last name landing in the air like a judge's gavel made her mouth go dry. She had worked to make that name a promise at this academy. If Vega was on your team, the plan would hold. If Vega ran a drill, you would come away better. If Vega spun you a tactical scenario, you would find yourself reaching for an answer you didn't know you had. "Stand down," the marshal said, as if this were just another exercise with safe boundaries. As if the blood in the sand were a theory problem to talk through later over cafeteria tea. "Back away," Krax said, voice filtered through his mandible mask, deep and amused. "Little mammal." "This is not your don't call me mammal," Arya said, flat, not loud. But the nearby drones mix picked it up and fed it to the bowl of the arena. Laughter rippled outward, the kind that carries the edge of someone else's discomfort. Krax tilted his head. "You will kneel. You will beg. You will." Arya took a step. Her heel sank a millimeter into the sand. The actuator hum adjusted. She measured distances, angles, reachable weapons. The sparse spears stacked at a side rack were too far. The fallen pulse snare lay 10 meters behind Krax. Tiri lay between. "Tiri?" Arya said again, but it came out like a knife's whisper, sharper than intended. All pleading shaved away. Tiri's lower right hand twitched. Relief hit Arya so hard she had to swallow it like a sob. "Cadet Vega," the marshal warned. "This is an order. Security will remove." "Try," Arya murmured. Not to the marshal, to the universe, to the assumption that humans were here as curiosities or future diplomats or soft-bodied support. Staff. The Academy loved to recite its founding myth. We created a place where species could learn to be more than the sum of their teeth. Arya believed in it. That didn't mean some houses didn't also bring their old cruelties to rehearse. Krax lowered his center of gravity. He meant to rush then, to bowl her aside and finish his lesson on hierarchy. His kind loved hierarchy the way some loved math or song. It was both language and appetite. Arya breathed once, in. The grid of the moment lit up inside her head. Each cell a potential, each potential a cost. "You hurt my best friend," she said. And this time the words left her clean, devoid of performance or threat. Simple as weather. Mandibles clicked in what might have been a smile. "Weaklings deserve." The crowd gasped as she closed the distance with a speed most had only seen in augmented replays. The kind that smoothed a human's ragged efficiency into something like grace. She didn't attack, not yet. She came just close enough to smell the metal polish on his armor. Just far enough that if he lunged he'd commit. "Arya." Someone's voice cut through. Instructor Halberd, her tactical theory mentor. From the raised command deck. "Vega, stop." She didn't look up. In the corner of her eye, a security drone rotated, establishing a line for a non-lethal shot. Another floated down to interpose. The systems that kept the right safe were finally waking to the paradox, to stun Krax in full charge. might mean stunning Arya, too. The algorithms did not love paradox. Arya flexed her hands open and closed. She could feel, in the flexor tendons, the phantom of the spear grip she wanted. This is the point, the bright point, she thought. All the careful does not matter if you step away from the point. Krax's nostrils flared. He came forward one testing step, then another, committing his weight. The ring's actuators purred. The banners along the rim rattled a chain reaction of color. Far above, a slice of dark sky held indifferent. Arya's voice found the exact register that reached microphones without needing to shout. "Now," she said, every syllable ironed and precise. "I'm going to hurt you." The arena held its breath. Cracks surged. The stun drone dropped. Little blue arcs spitting from its limbs. A baton, forgotten from a previous match, slid down a tilt in the sand, catching Arya's eye like a shard of winter light. All these things happened together in the first step of the fight that would be called. Later, the beginning of a legend though in that second. It was only a human cadet, hair stuck with grit, pulse loud in her ears, choosing to become an answer to a question the Academy should never have asked. The first impact rang through Arya's bones. Krax's armored fist swept where her head had been an instant before, cleaving empty air and showering sand as she rolled aside. The motion was instinct, now reflex born of thousands of hours on sparring mats back on Earth, of late-night drills under dim hangar lights when everyone else had gone to bed. She came up crouched, her breath controlled, her hands loose but ready. Krax loomed over her, a mountain of gleaming chitin and muscle, the arena lights refracting in sinister reds across his armor. The crowd's roar had shifted from excitement to something else, now uneasy, electric. Sensing that something was happening they hadn't paid for. This was no sanctioned duel anymore. This was a violation. Cadet Vega, disengage immediately. The marshal's voice boomed from the loudspeakers above, crisp and sharp with authority. You are in breach of arena protocol. Stand down or face expulsion. Arya ignored it. Somewhere behind Krax, medics were swarming over Tiria's still body, their diagnostic drones humming as they scanned for vitals. Arya couldn't see if her friend was breathing. She had to know. But first this, Krax laughed, a low, rumbling sound that vibrated the air between them. Human, he sneered, mandibles clicking in disdain. You step into the ring without permission. You insult the right itself. Your punishment, he lunged again, faster than a creature his size had any right to be. Arya barely twisted aside, the edge of his gauntlet grazing her ribs. Pain flared white-hot, but she rode it, grabbed his extended arm, and pivoted with his momentum. With a grunt, she slammed her boot into the back of his knee. The giant roared and stumbled, the impact denting the sand beneath him. It wasn't enough to drop him but enough to make him angry. Security breach. Someone shouted over the arena intercom. All drones converge. The metallic whine of hovering enforcement units grew louder. They circled above, ready to fire stun pulses, but they hesitated. Firing on a Zarkan champion risked political fallout. Firing on a human cadet mid-combat risked serious injury. The Academy's protocols hadn't accounted for this. Krax straightened, mandibles twitching. You're a fool, human. You think you can face me? He flexed, claws scraping against each other with a sound like grinding steel. I was trained in the crucible pits of Jurek before you even learned to walk. Then you should have learned mercy there, Arya spat. Because you're going to need it. She darted forward before he could retort. Speed was her only advantage. Krax had raw power, but Arya had agility, precision, and intent. She slid low, grabbing a discarded training spear from the ground. It wasn't meant to be lethal, just a polymer shaft with a padded tip, but in the right hands. Even a toy could be deadly. She swung. The spear cracked against Krax's jaw, forcing his head sideways. He snarled, retaliating with a brutal backhand. The blow slammed into Arya's shoulder, sending her skidding across the sand. Pain exploded through her arm, and she felt something pop. Warning. The AI intoned from above. Cadet Vega's vital signs indicate severe physical stress. Medical intervention recommended. Arya spat blood into the sand and pushed herself upright. Not yet. The crowd had stopped cheering. Now, silence hung over the arena like a storm cloud. Even the rowdy Zarkan contingent had fallen quiet. They were watching something they'd never seen before, a human cadet refusing to lose. Refusing to back down, even against a warrior who dwarfed her, Crax charged. Arya sidestepped, barely dodging his massive shoulder slam, but he was adapting, now learning her rhythm. His tail whipped around like a bladed cable, catching her thigh and hurling her backward. She hit the ground hard, the impact stealing her breath. Pathetic, Crax hissed. Your species is soft, weak. You crawl through the stars thinking you belong among us. But you are prey, human. Always prey. Arya's vision blurred. Through the haze of pain, her gaze drifted past Crax's hulking form, past the medics clustered around Tiritu, the Threxian's still, unmoving hand. Prey. The word echoed inside her skull, sharp and ugly. Tiri, the one who had patched up her wounds during grueling simulations. Tiri, who had taught her alien anatomy late into the night before exams. Tiri, who had stood up to an instructor who mocked primitive human reflexes. Prey. No. Arya's teeth clenched. Something deep within her, something old and fiercely human stirred. The same fire that had driven humanity to cross oceans, climb mountains, break the pull of gravity itself. The same stubbornness that refused to kneel. She rose, slowly, painfully, but she rose. Crax cocked his head. Still standing? Arya's answer was a blur of motion. She surged forward, feinting left, then pivoting right. The spear's shaft cracked against his knee joint. Crax roared, swinging wildly. Arya ducked under the arc, driving the spear into the softer tissue beneath his chest plate. He staggered, more in surprise than pain. You dare, I dare, she hissed, wrenching the spear free and slamming the butt into his jaw. For Tiri, each word punctuated another blow. For every weak voice you tried to silence, the final strike drove him backward, stumbling. The crowd erupted not in cheers, but in gasps. The great Zarkan warrior was losing ground to a human cadet. Cease combat. The marshal shouted. Both participants stand down. But Crax wasn't listening. Humiliation twisted his features into a mask of pure hatred. I will kill you for this. Then you'll have to catch me first. She darted aside as he lunged. His claws tore a furrow in the sand where she'd been. He turned, roaring, only for Arya to leap onto a raised gravity platform. It hummed beneath her boots as she used the elevation to launch herself down spear first. The impact drove Crax to his knees. Sand flew. Armor cracked. Silence. The crowd was utterly still now. Every eye fixed on the tableau, the Zarkan champion kneeling, gasping, while a human cadet stood over him. Spear poised for a finishing blow she would never deliver. Do you yield? Arya demanded, voice cold and shaking with rage. Crax's mandibles quivered. I yield. The announcer's voice wavered. Combat terminated. Protocol breach recorded. Medical units deploying. Arya dropped the spear. It clattered uselessly to the sand. She turned away from Crax without another word and sprinted toward the medics. Tiri, she cried, falling to her knees beside her friend. Tiri, can you hear me? The Threxian's eyes fluttered. A weak, pained chitter escaped her lips. You idiot, she whispered. You weren't supposed to fight. Arya laughed, a sound halfway between relief and tears. You know I never follow the rules. The medics ushered her back, but not before she squeezed Tiri's hand once, firmly, promising she'd never let anyone hurt her again. As they loaded Tiri onto a levitation stretcher and carried her out of the arena, Arya stood alone in the sand. Above her, banners still rippled. The crowd still murmured. Drones still recorded. She had broken every rule. She had jeopardized her career, and she had just made one of the most powerful enemies in the academy. But none of that mattered, because they had hurt her best friend, and that meant the rules were gone. From the command deck, Instructor Halberd watched the scene unfold, a complicated expression crossing his scarred face. She's finished, said one of the administrators beside him. Expelled, probably arrested. Halberd shook his head slowly. No, he murmured. Not finished. She's just getting started. The suspension cell was colder than Arya expected. It was a deliberate kind of cold, engineered, sterile, meant to chill emotion as much as flesh. The walls were polished obsidian black alloy, their surface so smooth it reflected her image back at her like a ghost. She sat cross-legged on the floor, bruises blooming across her ribs, knuckles raw and split. Her academy uniform shredded from the fight. The door had sealed behind her 12 hours ago. 12 hours since the arena riot. 12 hours since she'd seen Tiri's blood staining the sand. And still, they hadn't expelled her. That was what gnawed at her now, when the door finally hissed open. The figure who stepped through wasn't security. It was him, Instructor Halberd, tall and sharp-eyed, with a soldier's posture and a scholar's patience. He'd been Arya's mentor since day one. "On your feet, Cadet," he said. She stood, jaw tight. "Am I being court-martialed?" Halberd's lips twitched. Not quite a smile. Not yet. He clasped his hands behind his back and began pacing. "You violated 6 articles of the Academy Charter, assaulted a fellow cadet, ignored repeated disengagement orders, and caused an interspecies diplomatic incident that's already trending across for sectors." Arya held his gaze, and Halberd said, stopping in front of her, "You did it because your best friend was being beaten past surrender, because our protocols failed to protect her, because we failed." The silence stretched. Finally, he exhaled. "The Council wants your expulsion. The Zarkan Embassy wants your head. The humans on the board want to recall you to Earth before this turns into a war. Then do it," Arya said flatly. "I won't apologize." "Oh, I know." Halberd stepped closer, lowering his voice. "But there's another option." The Afur slid a datapad from his coat and tossed it onto the floor. The screen flickered to life with a holographic schematic of an arena larger, more complex, and infinitely more lethal than the one Arya had fought in. "The Grand Gauntlet," Halberd said. "It hasn't been invoked in 72 years. A sanctioned combat trial, older than the Academy itself. Win, and you clear your record. You walk free, graduate with honors. And the Zarkan House Jurek faces formal censure for breach of code. And if I lose, then you're expelled, and likely dead." Arya stared at the projection. The gauntlet was infamous even in whispers, an arena trial where one cadet stood against many, sometimes dozens facing traps, drones, and opponents who fought with live weapons instead of padded simulators. "Who am I fighting?" she asked. "Anyone who volunteers," Halberd said. "And every Zarkan who signed the petition for your expulsion has already volunteered. House Jurek included." Of course they had. Arya flexed her aching hands. "If I win, Tiri, she receives full medical reconstruction and lifetime veteran privileges. I made that part of the deal. There was nothing more to discuss. Then I accept." Preparations the next 5 days were a blur of brutal conditioning. Arya woke before dawn and ran until her legs trembled. She sparred against 5 drones at once, each programmed to mimic Zarkan aggression. She trained in shifting gravity environments until she could fight upside down, without losing her footing. At night, she visited Tiri in the medbay. The Threxian's injuries were severe cranial fractures, torn cartilage, organ bruising, but the doctors said she would live. On the 3rd night, she was awake, her eyes bleary but sharp. "You're insane," Tiri whispered, her voice raspy. "The gauntlet? Arya, no human has ever survived that trial. Then I'll be the first." Tiri's lower hand squeezed hers weakly. "You don't have to do this for me." "Yes," Arya said softly. "I do." The day of the Gauntlet Arena Dome was 3 times larger than the one she'd stormed before. Its sand was crisscrossed with shifting platforms, electromagnetic barriers, and weapon racks. Overhead, banners from hundreds of civilizations rippled in the artificial wind. And above those, colossal holoscreens projected the names of the 60 cadets who had entered the gauntlet. 60. Against 1, the crowd roared when Arya stepped into the light. Some booed, some cheered. Most were simply there to watch history one way or another. Her pulse was steady, her breathing calm. Every nerve in her body felt alive. A voice boomed from the loudspeakers. "Cadet Arya Vega of Earth, charged with breach of protocol, accepts the trial of the Grand Gauntlet. Victory shall absolve her of all crimes. Defeat shall end her tenure in the Academy. Combatants, prepare for engagement." Across the arena, the first wave of opponents, 10 armored cadets from Zarkan and Klivak, spread out, circling her like predators. Above them, drones whirred, their weapons humming with live charge. The starting tone blared, and the battle began. The first wave came at her from all sides. Claws, plasma batons, and heavy shields converging in a deadly rush. Arya ducked under a swinging blade, driving her elbow into a Clivax's solar plexus. He crumpled, and she snatched his fallen shock rod, flipping it into her grip. The next attacker lunged, she sidestepped and slammed the rod into his neck. Electricity danced across his armor, dropping him to the sand. Another Zarkan swung a plasma glaive. She parried with the rod, sparks flying, then kicked him square in the chest, sending him over the edge of a gravity platform. He fell into a magnetic field and was yanked off the field entirely, disqualified. Within 3 minutes, the first 10 were down. The crowd erupted, but there were 50 more. Traps and tactics. The second wave was smarter. They coordinated 2 sharpshooters on elevated platforms, 5 melee fighters flushing her toward a series of traps. Energy mines pulsed faintly beneath the sand, their presence betrayed only by the subtle distortion of the air. Arya sprinted toward a pillar, sliding into cover as plasma bolts scorched the ground where she'd been. She snatched a fallen comlink from a disabled cadet and hacked into the arena's drone feed, patching the visual into her wristband. Their mine clusters, trap nodes, blind spots. She lured 2 opponents into a choke point, then triggered a drone strike over their heads. The blast sent them tumbling. A third she baited into an energy net, ducking out at the last second as the trap swallowed him whole. Wave by wave, the numbers dwindled. 30 left, then 20, then 15. Her muscles screamed, her lungs burned, but she kept moving. The final duel, and then it was just the 2 of them. Cracks. He stepped into the arena like a conquering warlord, his carapace freshly polished, his red house sigils gleaming. He had been waiting for this moment, waiting to finish what he started. You should have run home. Human, he growled. Now, I will end you in front of the galaxy. Arya raised her weapon, a battered shock spear salvaged from the field. You couldn't end me when I was unarmed and unprepared. What makes you think you can now? He charged. The impact of their clash shook the arena. Cracks swung with bone-breaking force, his blows sending shockwaves through her arms. Arya ducked, rolled, countered with precision strikes aimed at his joints and weak points. She used every lesson she'd ever learned, every scar she'd ever earned. The fight lasted 7 minutes. 7 minutes of hell. In the end, Cracks overextended, one reckless swing too many. Arya slipped inside his guard and drove the spear's charged tip into the seam. Beneath his chest plate, sparks erupted. He roared, collapsing to his knees. Do you yield? Arya demanded, voice hoarse but steady. His mandibles trembled. I yield. The crowd was silent for 3 long seconds, then it erupted into thunderous applause. A grave made of Sandoni by 1. Medics and drones carried the unconscious bodies of her opponents away. The once pristine arena was now a field of craters, shattered weapons, and fallen warriors. 60 had entered. 1 remained. The announcer's voice rang out over the chaos. Cadet Arya Vega victorious. Trial complete. All charges expunged. Arya fell to one knee, exhausted but unbroken, as the crowd chanted her name. Human, human, human. She tilted her head back and breathed deep. This was no longer just about vengeance. This was a message for every species that called humanity weak, for every empire that believed compassion was cowardice, for every warrior who thought strength was cruelty. They had hurt her best friend, and for that, Arya Vega had turned the arena into a grave. In the VIP gallery, Instructor Halberd stood with his arms crossed, a rare smile ghosting across his lips. I told them, he murmured. She wasn't finished, and somewhere, in a medbay far from the cheers and the cameras, Tiri stirred awake. Did she win? She whispered. The medic smiled. She did more than win. She made history. The medical bay was quiet, a rare kind of quiet that existed only in the hours after catastrophe. Dim light pulsed softly from the biomonitors. Nanite injectors hummed their steady rhythm. And at the center of it all, wrapped in a cocoon of healing gel and filtered air, Tiri opened her eyes. For a moment, she thought she was dreaming. The ceiling above her was blurred, the world muted by sedatives. Then she heard it, a soft, rhythmic beep, and smelled antiseptic and ozone. Reality returned, piece by piece. Welcome back, a familiar voice said. Tiri turned her head, a slow, heavy motion, and saw Arya Vega sitting beside her bed. She was slumped forward in a chair, elbows resting on her knees, eyes ringed with exhaustion. A long, thin scar crossed her cheek. The bandages peeking from beneath her sleeves told their own story. How? Tiri's voice was dry, almost inaudible. How long? 5 days since the gauntlet, Arya said, straightening. 3 since you came out of the coma. 5 days, Tiri blinked. You won. Arya didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached forward and gently took Tiri's lower hand in hers, careful, as if touching something fragile. 60 entered, she said finally. Only 1 walked out, and they're still trying to figure out how a soft human did it. A faint chitter escaped Tiri, not quite a laugh, but close enough. I told you. You were insane. You did, Arya said. And as usual, you were right. The ripples across the Galaxite Grand Gauntlet had been more than a trial. It had been a signal, a warning that rippled across every corner of the galactic coalition. The feeds were calling her the human storm. Others called her the reckoner of Vega. Political forums debated whether she had dishonored the Academy or reminded it of its founding purpose. Protests had erupted on 3 worlds demanding reform of the arena laws. A half-dozen alien governments, Threxia among them, called for House Durok's formal censure. And, most shocking of all, the Zarkan Dominion had remained silent. The footage of Krax, heir to one of the most powerful houses in the Dominion, kneeling in the sand had become the most replayed clip in galactic history. The symbolism was inescapable. An inferior human, bloodied but unbroken, forcing one of the galaxy's apex predators to yield. Arya had not just fought a battle. She had rewritten the narrative, consequenced their days after the gauntlet. Arya stood before the Council of Commanders, the highest authority in the Academy. The chamber was vast and cold, carved from ancient obsidian, with banners from every founding species draped in solemn rows. 12 counselors sat in a semicircle before her, their gazes heavy with judgment. Cadet Vega, boomed Counselor Zyron of the Clivax. You stand before us charged with gross insubordination, violation of arena protocol, and assault against multiple fellow cadets. Arya stood tall, hands clasped behind her back. Yes, Counselor, and yet, said Counselor Arthas, a human woman from Earth, you also stand as the victor of the Grand Gauntlet, the first human in history to do so. By the terms of the trial, your charges are expunged. Your record is not merely clean, it is exemplary, the chamber murmured. But make no mistake, Zyron hissed, his crystalline eyes narrowing. You have shaken the foundation of this institution. The coalition itself trembles at your actions. Then maybe, Arya said evenly, it needed to. A ripple of shock swept the chamber. Halberd, standing quietly near the rear, allowed himself a small, proud smile. Counselor Arthas cleared her throat. Your actions have revealed deep flaws in our system, flaws we can no longer ignore. Effective immediately, the Code of Conduct for Interspecies Combat will be revised. Non-lethal enforcement protocols will be strengthened, and cadets found violating surrender conditions will face expulsion. Zyron glared. You have caused us untold diplomatic headaches, human, but perhaps history will judge you kindly. Arya bowed her head. I didn't do this for history. A new Codetwa weeks later, the Academy unveiled a new monument in the central courtyard. A towering column of black obsidian rose toward the sky, etched with the Academy's revised Code of Honor. Principles forged from the aftermath of the gauntlet. At the base of the monument, in letters carved from luminescent alloy, was a single line. Strength is not cruelty. Courage is not conquest. Justice does not kneel. The inscription was signed with one name. Arya Vega students gathered in clusters beneath it, whispering about the human cadet who had defied empires and lived. Some spoke with awe, some with resentment. Others simply stared at the inscription, thoughtful, as if trying to decide which side of history they wanted to stand on. Healing be the time Tiri was cleared for discharge. The galaxy had already begun to change. They met again in the Academy Gardens, a quiet sanctuary of alien flora where the air shimmered faintly with bioluminescent pollen. Tiri walked slowly, leaning on a cane. 2 of her lower joints were still healing, but her eyes were brighter, sharper. You shouldn't have done it, she said softly, staring out over the crystal lake. Probably not, Arya admitted, but I'd do it again. Tiri shook her head. You could have died. I would have, Arya said. If that's what it took. Silence fell between them, not uncomfortable, but weighty, the kind that spoke more than words. Finally, Tiri turned to her, a faint smile ghosting across her mandibles. You changed everything, you know. Arya shrugged. I didn't set out to, doesn't matter. You did, epilogued the cadet and the legend months later. When the Academy's next class of recruits arrived, they would walk past the new monument and whisper stories about the girl from Earth, who had turned an arena into a graveyard. They'd learn about how she faced 60 opponents alone, how she had stood against a champion who towered over her, how she had changed the laws of the Academy and reshaped the way the galaxy understood strength. And in hushed tones, they'd talk about the why, about a tiny Threxian medic who had been beaten nearly to death, and the human who refused to let that stand. Arya Vega never claimed to be a hero. She never asked for glory, or fame, or vengeance. She had acted for one reason, and one reason alone, because someone she loved had been hurt. And when that happened, the rules stopped mattering. The empires, the traditions, the hierarchies, all of it burned away beneath the raw, human truth of it. One evening, long after the last of the celebration broadcasts had faded, Arya and Tiri stood side by side beneath the monument. Do you think they'll remember us? Tiri asked quietly. Arya watched the stars ignite in the sky above the Academy, countless and bright. Maybe, maybe not, but they'll remember what we did, and that's enough. And with that, the two friends, the medic and the warrior, the healer and the storm, walked back toward the Academy's lights together. No longer just cadets, no longer just students, but the beginning of a legend.